Hey! Hello, it's been a while. How's it going, YouTube? My name is Liz, and today is March 10th, which is 8 years for me of being sober. I shared a video on here 3 years ago now, when I was 5 years sober, about my whole story, and that went over really well. People seemed to be interested in that, which was actually surprising to me at the time. So I thought, another 3 years have gone by, maybe I should do an update. Yes, my hair is crazy today. It doesn't normally look like this. I curled it for a little Instagram video, but I kind of like it. Anyway, alright, so my last video that I shared about this, I talked a lot about like my backstory of my drinking days leading up to my sobriety, how I got sober, and what sobriety was like for the first 5 years. So I'm not going to go into all of that again. I'll link that video below if you want to listen to that full spiel, but for the rest of you, I will just give a brief recap on this video. So, where do I begin? I think from a young age, like it was just, I was always going to be an alcoholic. I was obsessed with the idea of drinking and partying and couldn't wait to be old enough to do so. I started drinking, 14 years old. I was obsessed with it. I was blacking out all the time, getting into trouble, but I was also a pretty high-functioning alcoholic as a young person, keeping up good grades, sports, jobs, whatever. The drinking continued into my late teens, early 20s. I got multiple DUIs, arrested, lots of bad shit happened, but not horribly bad shit. I mean, I'm very lucky and I'm alive today, so there you go. I ended up getting sober once when I was 21, not by choice. A boss that I had sort of forced me into it, and I was devastated over that. I didn't want to, but I decided to go along with it because I wanted to keep that job. So I did a stretch of sobriety for a year and a half. And then after a year and a half, I chose to go back to drinking again. I say it that way rather than like relapsed because I feel like it was a very thought out, conscious choice to go back to drinking. Like, oh, I did a year and a half of being sober, so I'm sure that means I can drink responsibly now. So I chose to go back to it, and it went right back to the chaos that it was previously. That went on for a couple of years, another DUI, and eventually I quit again by my own choice this time. So now it's been the 8 years since then. So that's kind of like the quick version. I wasn't really sure what else to talk about on this video, to be honest. I feel like so many people were interested in to hear more on this topic, but other than sharing my personal story, like I'm not a professional and I didn't really know what else to say. I'm not like super active in the, like AA culture or anything like that. I'm not an, expert or working in the field. So I don't know, like this is just my life and it feels normal now. So yeah, I wasn't really sure what people wanted, but I ended up just asking on here and on Instagram if anyone had questions for me about sobriety. So got a bunch of those. Thank you to everyone who asked. And I figured that would be a good way to, get me talking about it a little bit. So there's a bunch. I'm going to try to just whip through these quickly, unless something really speaks to me. Number 1. I'm in and out of sobriety, but would like to be all in. How do you hang out with friends who still drink? I feel like I'm saying goodbye to boozy me, but I don't know who new me is. Blah. So when I first got sober, I definitely, I don't want to say I struggled with this, but when I was drinking, I used to go out and hang out with people and have friends. And when I first quit, I didn't want to do any of that, and so I didn't, but I felt like guilty over it, or like ashamed, or like something was wrong with me because I wasn't social. And in hindsight, I used to use alcohol as that like social crutch, although I don't think I saw it that way then. But so in my sobriety, like it takes time and it's gradual, but I learned more about who I am and what I actually enjoy doing and who I actually enjoy being around. And eventually I just became okay with the fact that like I'm an introverted, quiet person. I'm a creative person. I like to be home and do my own thing. Like I don't want to go out and have friends and hang out with friends. And I'm okay with that. Like I'm confident in that now. So what I would say to that question is just, you know, you may need a transition period where you're figuring out who you are, and your friends, if they're your real friends, should respect that time. You can tell them that you need that time, and you know, if they matter, they'll be there when you get through it. I myself got a DUI. It's on my record, so anything I apply for, they find out. My biggest curiosity is, how did you get over the stigma of having one, or does that feeling of embarrassment last forever? So yeah, I got 2 DUIs, and the funny thing is when I had my second DUI, Luke got a DUI, so we both had one at the same time, which I guess was embarrassing at the time. I don't really remember feeling that way, except for when I had a breathalyzer in my car. That was embarrassing. That's a whole nother video. But yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't like telling everyone about it and flaunting it at the time, but as more time has passed and as I'm comfortable in my sobriety now and I have respect for the person that I am now, I don't mind talking about that DUI. Like that's part of my story, and that's what makes it so cool where I am now, because that is where I came from, you know? So in general, I would say like with time you'll get over that. With job applications and interviews though, that I don't really have any good advice for. I've worked for myself this whole time, so I can't really relate, but I would just assume that most employers probably see that more often than you think. I mean, a lot of people get DUIs. You gotta just own it. I'm interested in hearing your story of your sobriety, so yeah. Already kind of shared that. Once again, I'll link it below. A couple of what is your why? Why did you choose sobriety? What is it that finally got you sober? What pushed you to get sober? So, I mean, I feel like I got sober because in a way I just didn't really have another choice. My life was so chaotic and out of control, and just constantly bad things were happening. I mean, I guess I could have chosen to continue to drink and to continue to fuck up my life. But it did just get bad, and there wasn't really any one particular thing. It was just everything combined. But I mean, the big ones that stand out for sure are the DUIs. And the last final straw, which I talked about on my last video, was I was on vacation with some of my family and Luke and I were drinking, got in a fight, and I was blacked out. I don't remember it, but I punched him and gave him a black eye, and it was really bad. And we were like so concerned about when we went home, you know, what his parents would say about that. So right, the day that we got home is the day that I quit drinking. So that was definitely like the final straw. But the general why am I sober? Life is just way better. It's way simpler, less chaotic. Yeah. Did it stick on your first try? Like I said, no. I did get sober once when I was younger, and then here I am the second time. But I think that was good in a way that happened, because the first time I was sober, like I always wondered if I could go back to drinking, or what it would be like if I went back to drinking, if I could do it better. So I think it was just, there was no question I was eventually going to try again. But the second time around, now it's like I know what happens if I go back to drinking, so there's no temptation anymore. I already know what will happen. How difficult is it to be around people who aren't sober? I don't mind being around people who are drinking. I mean, it's not like that's where I don't want to like hang out in bars in my free time, but I don't mind being around people who drink. The only person that I mind if they were drinking is my partner, my significant other, which is Luke, who is sober now. But I just feel like it's not necessary to have a significant other who is also sober, but it just makes life so much easier and feels like we're a team, you know, whenever we're out and other people are doing their thing, we got our thing. Has it been hard to stay sober? It doesn't feel like it has been at this point, but I suppose it was in the beginning. Like when I first quit drinking and Luke didn't, and I was very alone, that did feel a lot harder. I didn't really know what to do with myself in the beginning either before I started finding like hobbies and stuff. So I just like worked all the time, and yeah, I guess it was harder in the beginning. But the more time that's passed, the more it just becomes like, this is just normal. This is just, I don't even like think about it. Sometimes I forget about alcohol. What do you do when a craving happens? My cravings are always emotional or nostalgic. It's funny, I didn't drink a lot of champagne, but champagne's the only thing that I like sometimes kind of miss. Like I miss the taste of it. But I'll get sparkling cider once in a while if it's like a, you know, New Year's, or even more than that. Every night with dinner, I drink kombucha out of a wine glass just because, I don't know, that's my fancy like end of the day ritual. Make yourself a fancy sober drink and put it in a fancy glass. What's been your biggest struggle? I think just learning more about like, not learning about, but living with my anxiety. I definitely have some form of just anxiety in general, and I think I self-medicated with alcohol when I was younger. It was my way of like not being stressed out because I would forget about whatever was going on and just live in the moment. And without alcohol and being fully present all the time, I feel like I live with anxiety all the time. And so learning how to live with that and not having a crutch if you're, you know, going through a rough time or having a bad day, like you gotta just be with it in yourself, and that's a hard thing to do. Have you ever felt like you hit a wall maybe 5 or 6 months in? God, that was so long ago now. I don't remember specifically 5 or 6 months in. I feel like I have an issue sometimes with the big year landmarks, 1 year, 5 years. I'm such a like goal-oriented person that once I hit like a big landmark like that, like 1 year, part of me is like, okay, you can check that off the list and move on. Rather than like, I wouldn't at 11 months choose to drink, like I would stick out the year, you know? What was the biggest thing that helped you get through it? It meaning sobriety, I assume. I guess hobbies, sports. When I first got sober, I randomly started snowboarding, and then I started doing skydiving, and then like circus arts, pole and hand balancing and silks, and then I got into hiking. And none of those things were like, oh, I'm sober, so I should go do something else. It just like naturally evolved and happened. But I think those things, looking back, I know they wouldn't have happened if I was still drinking, and I wouldn't be able to live that lifestyle if I was still drinking. So I feel like that helps keep me motivated to stay sober and inspired and happy in my sobriety, because I know I have this cool life that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Do you feel you have more happiness in your life now? Kind of feel like I just said that, but yes, absolutely. Like sometimes you have that like FOMO, like, oh, it used to be so fun when I drank. I mean, as much as bad shit happened, a lot of fun shit happened. And I do miss those times sometimes, but you have to like remember, at least for me, I blacked out all the time. So I think I had fun, but do I even actually remember what I was doing that was fun? Like, I just think it was fun. I don't really remember it. So I feel like the type of happiness that I have now is like way more real and fulfilling. It may not be as crazy and wild, but it's not fleeting and there's no hangover. Do you have any regrets about becoming sober, even if petty? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I don't really feel like I have any regrets about becoming sober. Yeah, no. Like I said, I mean, those occasional moments where you feel like, oh, it used to be so much fun and you're missing out on that now. But then I bring myself back to reality and I know that's not true. How do you stay awake during parties? I'm way older than you, like 10 years probably, and I'm sober, so I don't go to parties. Okay, we're gonna put two questions together here. Do you drink at all, like maybe a beer with dinner or no alcohol, period? And do you smoke weed or are you sober completely? Some have different understandings. So I needed to put these two together because this is the controversial one. Okay. Do you drink at all? No. I'm 100% sober from alcohol. I've not had one sip in 8 years, and I have a very hard boundary there because I was an alcoholic through and through. That was my problem. I can't have one sip. Miss Piggy, stop barking. Hey! I can't have a single sip, you know what I mean? And some people maybe aren't like that. I don't know. But for me, in my sobriety, 100% zero alcohol. Leading into the other question, do you smoke weed or you're sober completely? So, here's where it gets controversial. I think a lot of people would think that sobriety is 100% sober, alcohol and drugs. And I understand that. And that it would have to be that way for some people. For me, drugs was never a problem. Like, I dabbled when I was younger, but I was never into any drugs. Like, they just didn't really agree with me. I didn't really like them. I don't know. It was just never my thing. Alcohol was my thing. So when I got sober, like I said, there's that hard boundary around alcohol. I never really even thought about drugs having a boundary or being part of that. Not that I was really actively doing any drugs, but it just, like, to me, for me, they are two totally separate issues, and like one does not instigate the other. So for me, I'm gonna keep saying that because I don't want to promote like somebody that's trying to get sober to go smoke weed, because to each their own, and everybody's gonna have their own journey, and that's not gonna work for a lot of people, and I do understand that, and I'm not promoting that. I think most people that are really into like AA culture would agree that weed is not okay to use, but I'm not in that camp. Do I smoke weed? Not really. I've gone years at times without it, and I've never really liked it. I used to be like really paranoid or panicky with weed, and so it's just not my thing, but I'm not against it. And I would say like maybe once or twice a year, I'll like take a puff or have a 5 milligram edible or something, and that's plenty for me. I have no interest in using more than that. So, to answer your question, am I sober completely? I guess that is now subjective to this audience. I went back and forth about whether or not I even wanted to include this question, because over the last few years of being more present on YouTube and social media, like that has been something that I felt like I wasn't being honest about. But it really isn't that. I have no shame in my sobriety and the way I do things. I just didn't want to influence others. So, yeah, I don't know. Please don't judge me or be mad at me. This is my personal story. Okay, moving on from that one. How much were you actually drinking before you decided to stop? So, that's a good question, and it definitely varied throughout, you know, the years, but I would say I was drinking alcohol every night, and I was getting blacked out drunk, I don't know, at least a few nights a week. And that could mean I could have a few drinks and blackout, or I could have freaking 4 bottles of wine and blackout. Like, you never knew what was gonna happen when I started drinking. And my problem wasn't like, I didn't like black out, pass out. I blacked out and stayed up and continued drinking for the foreseeable, you know, the rest of the night or whatever, would wake up and God knows where. So yeah, it wasn't like, oh, I came home and, you know, had a 12-pack to myself every night. It was all over the place. Was just thinking about you yesterday. Have you found your tempted to turn to other substances or addictions. We just kind of touched on that. Used to abuse Adderall and was definitely addicted. And then after I gave that up, I find I'm constantly on my phone. It's like I traded one addiction for another. And the next one, do you find that you have trouble with eating sweets? Sugar is definitely an issue for me. I don't know if I want to use the word addicted, but it is probably my biggest vice. I eat a lot of sugar. And my phone is definitely another big one. So yeah, and hobbies, I mean, I've replaced, I get obsessive over anything really I dabble in. So as long as, you know, if it's freaking sugar and my phone and hiking, like, I'm okay with that. So glad you're thinking of doing this. I want to support my best BFF, currently in rehab after he's finished in a couple weeks. He feels awesome and I want him to stay healthy. That wasn't really a question, but I'm assuming you're wondering how you can be supportive. I mean, I don't know, I was gonna say there's nothing you can really do. Just because, like, choosing sobriety is such a personal thing and that person has to choose it. You can't, like, talk them into it or force them into it. But being supportive might look like maybe giving them some space, checking in to see if they're okay, but letting them figure it out. Or at least that's how it would be for me, because I'm introverted. But maybe suggesting doing something, doing an activity, hiking, whatever. Because for me, that really helps to fill my time with something else that I could get excited about. You know, when you're just sitting at home doing nothing, then of course you're going to be thinking about wanting to drink. And yeah, I mean, some people, I would say in the beginning, maybe don't drink around them, because that would be a trigger for a lot of people, not everybody, but just feel that out. Don't freaking be that guy that's like, oh, just have one. You know, I feel like that's obvious. How active are you these days in sobriety culture, and how often do you feel you need to stay connected to it for peace of mind? So by sobriety culture, I'm assuming you mean like AA or something similar, and that was never really my thing. I did go to AA in the beginning. It started off because it was court mandated, and then I continued for a while. But for me, I'm not a super social person, and so like forcing myself to be social when I didn't really feel comfortable was not it. But on the other side, I work one-on-one with clients all day, and for some reason in the dreadlock world, I have like a bunch of clients who are in some form of recovery. So, and these are people that I know really well, that I've worked with for a while. So it's kind of cool that even though I'm not going to AA, I still have a lot of people in my life that are sober, and we end up chatting. So I do think I get to talk about it maybe more than the average person in their normal daily life. Has your choice to go sober influenced any other decisions? I have also chose sobriety maybe for different reasons. Has it influenced any other decisions? I mean, I feel like it's influenced the entire trajectory of my life. Because yeah, like I said, all those hobbies that I found, I mean, even just opening my business, getting married, buying a house, like all those things I really believe, looking back, never would have happened if I was still drinking. So yeah, being sober has affected and changed everything for me, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but that's what I got. How to keep your extensions from thinning out. Someone asked the wrong question on the wrong, or answered the. And then, doesn't look like I have any more questions, just a bunch of, you know, sweet comments. So I'll put some of those here while I just wrap it up, I guess. I hope this wasn't boring. I hope you got something out of this. Like I said, I wasn't really sure what to say. It's the best lifestyle. I'm not trying to push anyone to be sober, but if you're considering it or thinking about it, because I do get people that message me that a lot, that they're like maybe considering, and I will just say freaking go for it. It might sound like it's lame, but it's not. It's cool. And yeah, 8 years, like, wow, that's crazy. It's flown by in a good way. And I would never go back to it. I mean, Luke and I always joke that when we're like 65, we're gonna start drinking again. But no, I don't imagine that we'll actually do that. That's another thing. So I'm 8 years. Luke just had 4 years in December. And I think he loves it too. Like, it's funny. I just never, we were both partying when we met. And so like, who'd have thunk? But our life is so good. And oh yeah, that was a little story I wanted to share. We don't fight very much. Like, we get along great. We're both very independent. We do our own thing. And we got into a little argument a couple weeks ago. It was over something stupid that we were like watching on TV, but it just escalated. And it continued because we're both stubborn for the rest of the night. And we were like laying in bed at the end of the night, and I think we maybe finally got over it, or at least pretended to. And I just kept saying, you know, I'm so grateful we're sober, because that stupid little fight, if we were still drinking, like that would have turned into a whole thing. I would have been running away down the street. Like, he'd be chasing me, I'd be lost, you know, like, we'd be going to bed at 6 in the morning, still freaking fighting probably. I don't know. Anyways, yeah. I just had that moment. Like, I feel like I said this earlier, but I don't think about the fact that I'm sober very often. This is just normal. But I did have that moment like a couple of weeks ago of like, oh, I'm really grateful that we're both sober, because we can actually like have an argument and like still go to bed at a normal time and just get over it, and it doesn't turn into like the end all be all, you know? Anyway, I guess that's enough rambling. Sorry I've been neglecting you, YouTube. And that's it. I hope you have a good night, and cheers.